What's going on? It's your man, Jay Blaze, the Daddy Dialogue Podcast, episode 19. And we are in the historic Lyric Theater in downtown Miami. I got a good friend of mine with me today. And I am extremely excited, bro, because I didn't know after so long, God sort of picked you to be here with me on this specific subject, which I think is extremely important. And I've sort of been negating. So I want to say this disclaimer before we even get going. This is my friend Dunamis. He's a worship leader, father. The man does music. Does a bunch of stuff. I'll tell you what he does in a couple of minutes. But first, I want to have the disclaimer. And I thought about this 100 million ways how I was going to say this before I even started. Is that this will be the most vulnerable and will show the biggest flaws in my personal walk with Jesus right now. This is the one area, which sadly, because I've done radio for so long, you would think would be the strongest.
Right.
But it's not. And currently I'm working for a radio station in Chicago, so I'm listening to music all the time. But this will be easily the most vulnerable I will be ever, Dunamis. So I want to tell you that now. Show me grace, brother, in this situation.
It's going to be good, man. We're
going
to make it happen, bro.
And even, I don't know what's happening, but my phone is acting crazy. Doesn't want to give me my notes, but it's okay because I knew some of the stuff I was already going to talk about. First of all, today we're going to talk about worship music and worship when it pertains to our children. And it's something that, especially now, I'm clear that music is at its all-time. It's the most powerful it's ever been, ever. Just music in general. If we think about like the Grammys and some of the things we've seen as of recent, the influence of music over young people is redundant.
It's an amazing tool, for sure. It's an amazing tool, and I think we just have to take advantage of it and use it to the best way possible.
Exactly. Like flip it on its head.
Yeah.
And so for me, like knowing that music is powerful, I wanted to have this conversation, first of all, of understanding the importance. Look at God, I already got my notes back.
Yeah.
The importance of worship music when it comes to our children.
Yeah.
And so when I was hitting you up and going to have a conversation with you, the first thing, the conviction started to hit, Dunamis, I'm going to tell you where. I was like, oh my God, this all comes back to me as a father.
Wow.
And so my hair stick up, bro, because I was like, oh my God, I'm about to be put on a really bad, because the thing with this, Dunamis, people see you do a podcast and they assume you're perfect. I've never said, we're professional failures. That's what I said in the last episode, but we're still trying to figure out how to be fathers. Now, we spoke off camera. We're always adjusting as dads. Like, you think you got it all good, a couple weeks are solid, and then all of a sudden your kid acts wild, and you got to come for their head. Or a chancleta, whichever one you choose to go. But so first of all, I wanted to say that music is everywhere. It's extremely powerful. It takes us places. So when we listen to worship music. And so I was thinking about, first, the importance of worship music when it comes to our children, and then it led me back to me. That's what I just said a couple of seconds ago. So I started evaluating my situation when I got into worship music. First of all, what music, and you can tell me some of your experience, and we're not talking about worship music just yet. The way I got introduced to music, it started to impact me, and it took me to places, whereas when I was a kid, I remember I was a jit, 7, 8 years old, in a bus. I barely spoke English. And I remember, I know now because I'm older, there was a 2 Live Crew song playing, hey, we want some whatever. This is all playing, blazing in the car. I'm with my sister. We don't know English. I'm just chanting whatever they're saying, but that song stuck. And so when I hear that song, that's the first place it takes me. And so that defines a lot of how strong music is in our lives. From there, I went from listening to 2 Live Crew on a Tuesday on a bus to hearing hymns on a Sunday at church. Because this is the thing that, and you could attest to this, I'm sure, because you're close to my age. You're not exactly my age, but you're close. Back then, the culture that exists with worship music was not even existent. My old people, los viejos míos, where they were singing hymns. They were beautiful songs, really slow, sort of militant, but they weren't like, I feel like worship, tell me, like, from your standpoint, worship music on the Christian side has become almost like a lifestyle, the way people, and it's not always good, because they dress a certain way, they look a certain way, they talk a certain way. Do you think it's evolved, right? Especially you, that you sing in a lot of different places with a lot of different people.
I agree. I think it has evolved from what we're talking about, the hymns, and then this just new wave of music and new chord progressions and all that stuff. But you know what's funny, Jay, that while you're saying that, I'm like, look at some of these artists. I was at a live show recently with a huge Christian artist, and they're singing hymns. They're going back to where it started, where we were raised, what we were raised on, because there's still power in that. With some new, maybe the music is a little different just so that it feels better, but they're going back to what worked for our parents, what worked for,
The little blue hymnal book.
Bro, they're going back to that because there's power in that, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I do think it has progressed for sure, and different musically, like you say, and fashion-wise, like it has progressed. But at the end of the day, I feel like across the globe and just the worship scheme, like worship leaders are coming back to their roots, and I could say it for myself
like
too.
You say, like the essence.
Yeah, like we grew up in the Hispanic church. We can relate to that. Like I'm going back. I find myself now in some church settings, and I'm going back singing old school songs, and I'm like, wow, like this hit different, and you got hundreds of people singing it back at you.
Like it still has power to this day after so many years.
There's still power in it, you know what I'm saying? So we can't neglect that, and yeah, like I said, it's different, and we've added different elements to it, to make it more modernized, but there's still power in it,
I'll say this, after doing a little homework and really researching and feeling a crazy amount of conviction.
Yeah.
Like being honest with you, and I'll tell you why. This is the part that really, I'm gonna give you a quote in a minute, but there was something that, as I did more research, really started to really hinder at my heart in the whole process. To the fact that after I started doing this research, I've had to quickly make some adjustments in my personal life with my kid and my wife that I just wasn't paying attention or wasn't really in tune. And so one of the key things, especially when we talk about worship, because some people could be like, that's too religious. Why are you talking about that? Why are we conversating about worship with your kids? Mm-hmm. The thing, and I've heard this 100 million times, I'm sure you have too. What we consume around our children, they're picking up. So we're putting that in them.
For sure.
And so, yes, I've heard this before, Dunamis. I've heard it in preachings, I've heard it written, I've seen it in different. But for some reason, recently, reading it, I was like, oh snap, I have some adjusting to make. Because there's moments as parents, as dads, where we're having a rough day, we're picking up our kid from school, whatever, from a spot.
Yeah.
We may put on a song that we don't think is doing any kind of damage.
Right.
And our kids are sitting back. They could be on their phone watching YouTube, but they're listening to the words. And eventually, it'll regurgitate out by something they say, a mention, it could be a cuss word, it could be a bunch of different things. It's happened to me. Like I have my son saying a word that I'm like, no cap, where you got that from? Like you just got that on YouTube? Like what? And so you're trying to figure out where.
Right.
And it's sometimes really hard.
Sure.
And so I started looking at me, because I got to use me as an example. I've done bad in that area. I've struggled in that area. There's been moments, I think I'm caught up in life, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I just want a decompression moment. I'll put on a song. It could be anything. It could be Lucky Day, it could be whoever, Yeba, it could be whoever. And I'm sitting there like a clown listening to this music, not knowing what I'm putting. And so don't get me wrong. I think there's a place and a thing for it.
Time and a place for everything, for sure.
I'm not against, like, if you want to listen to it, I'm fine with it. I just don't think it's smart when I have my son there. Not that I'm living this fake life, but that certain things I'm not trying to mature or speed up the process of when they're trying to, when I heard that 2 Live Crew song, bro, when I was like 8, come on, son, like that did something to me mentally. I was thinking about stuff I shouldn't have been thinking about.
Right.
Then I'm asking questions. What are they saying at the end of this song? Like, and people are like, oh my God, that's a reckless song. That's what they were. I had this, and the thing about, I think, is interesting, and then we'll get to some of these tips that I think are going to help people, is that you can't, I tell my son all the time, I try to have this conversation, I'm sure you've maybe had the same with your son, and it's that you can't always be there for every moment, like to defend them. And so the only thing they're going to fall on is the foundation you set with them. And worship has a lot to do with that.
I agree.
Because as I did more homework, I was realizing, oh my God, like, you tell me, Dooms, like when you're listening to worship music, on a constant basis. I'm not gonna lie, I don't listen to worship every day. I can't. I used to. Maybe I need to get back into it. That could be a problem. But I feel like the way I moved, the way my heart posture was different. And I'm being honest, bro. Like, when I'm not there, I'm a little aggressive.
Yeah.
I might not be the best father in the moment.
Right.
I might snap and say something out of character. And so I know I need it, one, because it helps my son with his faith walk.
Sure.
It reminds him who Jesus is and why we worship him. And so when I started thinking about those things, I said, I'm doing a really bad job. But I want to make sure that when we did this, yes, I'll feel the conviction and I'll take it for other fathers. But I was like, there's hope if you're making mistakes and you can change it.
Yeah.
And so I said, who do I know? And I was like, I know Doom.
Yeah.
And people who may not know, I didn't just meet Dunamis yesterday. I've known Dunamis for a really long time. Before he was a husband, when he was a single dude singing at churches in a small Toyota. Like, I know this man from way back. And so I was like, God, give me the right person. You came along. And so I want to paint the scenario for you so you can help me walk this out. I'm struggling, or I don't know how to slowly transition my kid into listening to worship. What can I do as a dad? Give me 3 steps. Make them pliable, where if anybody's listening, bro, I don't know how to do that. I barely listen to, how do I begin that process of saying, Father, and I know it's not going to be perfect. I know you're not the end all be all, and God will use it different ways, but give me a couple of things that I can use so people that are watching can say, okay, maybe I need to adjust this way, and I can approach. Because right now, when you tell me this, I'm going to use your ideas and be like, all right, God, I want to slowly transition. Because what I started, this is so sad, but I'm going to be real. I felt so convicted, and it's never happened with a podcast episode, where I was like, I had to have a conversation with my son and said, son, there's sometimes I'm listening to stuff you shouldn't be listening to, I shouldn't be listening to. And I said, son, if I say something out of order or say something wrong, keep me accountable. Like,
that's good.
Tell me.
That's good. Because
I tell you, but don't think it's always one-sided. Son, if you hear, he has, I'm sure you say, Dad, why are you saying that? Why are you talking like that? And so it's a reminder, and I think we should be accountable like that as fathers. Sure. And so help me, my friend, because I need all your knowledge and information. There's a, and I'll leave you with this. And I never do this. That's why I know God is doing something with this podcast or this episode that's extremely different. Psalms, and I don't do Bible verses at all.
Come on, man, let it go.
But this one's good. It's Psalms 8:1-2, and it says, Lord, O Lord, how majestic your name is on the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. This is the part that got me. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies. And if we can't set a foundation with our children, like, how do we expect to even have a backbone to defend ourselves when things come? And so, my friend, I need you like never before, and I believe like God brought you here. I'm usually real street with it, but this one means a lot to me because I know the power of worship. It's like I've told you many times, when you eat steak, you never want chicken. And so like when you know what real worship is, you've had it, when it's not the best singer, but God uses them, you know the power it has on your life. So man, I'm grateful that you're here, that God chose you, that you see the vision, and you're always open to helping me. So I'm all yours, man. I am here to learn.
Let's do it, man.
And adjust. So give me some things, man, that you think I could do as a father to begin, for any fathers that are watching, me especially, specifically, to start when it comes to getting my son to start, or my children to start getting into a life of understanding or loving worship.
For sure. First off, I want to say it's an honor to be on the Daddy Dialogue podcast with you, man. It's awesome just seeing you, continue with it and continue. I think it's necessary for fathers to have, this space to dialogue, like it says, and really get open and be transparent. And I think what it's going to do with not only this episode, but with many other episodes, it's going to have fathers reflect on themselves and look inside themselves and be like, how can I be better? We have examples, and we've had our fathers in our lives, and so, now, like we were talking offline, now we have our examples that we can look at. We can choose to do what they did.
That's really good.
And we can or choose to do what we wanted them to do, and now we can just use both the scenarios and make it and us be a father for our children. But when it comes to this whole worship thing, man, and again, like Jay said, it's not the end all be all. Maybe these answers won't make no sense to you, but I guess this is just experience that I've had with my son as a worship leader, an active worship leader. And just being in the worship space, just, you know, a little bit. Jay know me from when I was a rapper. And so just for him to see the transition, thank God that he took me out of that space, because that was definitely not where God wanted me to be, but it was necessary for that season. And so, you know, transitioning now for about the last 10 years doing this has been amazing.
Crazy, bro. I forgot about that. That's
Yeah, man, we've had some experiences, Jay and I together, man, but this dude is special to me, man, and anytime I could just, you know, conversate and hear what God is doing in him, it's amazing. But just when this worship thing, man, like just some practical stuff as we were talking about it, you know, just some practical things that came up. And one of the things that came up, Jay, was when, you know, when I go out too, I go out a lot and I'm in a lot of like youth conferences, and I'm like, man, I'm 34 years old. Like, how do I get to these kids, you know? And I related the two, and I'm like, man, one thing we can do besides starting to listen to worship music, like you said, I think we could just make worship fun. And that's talking back to the transition of how worship has evolved. Like, I think that there's a lot of like, you know, fun music now. They have, you know, they got the electronic, you know, music. They got this kids bop music that, you know, that kids can relate to, that it's not the hymns. It's not like, you know, and let's be clear, like worship music, when we're talking about it now, we're not talking about fast and slow music, but in this context, we're talking about, you know, like fast music. Like let's find some stuff that, you know, they can engage with, that they could, you know, sing along with, you know, like even that, like what I listen to in the car, like right now, you know, I listen to hip hop and I listen to worship music. Those are the two things I listen to: Christian hip hop and worship music. That's just what I've decided to do.
Yeah.
When I'm not listening to that, I'm listening to jazz and I'm listening to salsa. And my kids know that already.
Yeah.
Like if the radio is off, they say, "Oh, Papi, put on some jazz music," or put on some, and if not, it's worship. And I'm creating that atmosphere for them where they, and I'm not telling them, "Hey, you guys have to listen to this." That's what I'm doing. And like you said, they're seeing that. And so we're just being an example for them. And I think that that's where we can start, just being an example for them and showing them like, man, like this is fun. You know, and for me, like the context for me, like as a worship leader, I'm letting them see like, you know, how I do it, how I prepare week for week, you know, to come in and worship, you know, how I prepare our set list, how I prepare the tracks that we use. Like they see all that, you know, and they're like, oh, that's cool. Like, you know, and maybe many of you can't relate to that, but in the case of just listening, it's like, make worship fun, make it engaging.
And
like,
the fact you said there's like new version, I didn't know about that came.
yeah, there's like this kids bop, and
What?
bro, it's interesting.
See
yeah.
what I'm saying? I'm disconnected. I'm
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, and we don't listen to it, but I know
But
there is.
exist,
They take the songs that are like hot and they make them like into these good beats, you know. And then and going back to that, even when I go out now, like regarding making worship fun, like when I go out now, like I'm finding myself like doing a lot of like trap worship.
Okay.
And like when I get booked now, they're like, oh, can you come and, I saw you here, can you come and like do some of that trap worship? Because like the kids relate to that. And I'm not even doing it like intentionally. I'm just worshiping and I'm like, how can we vibe this out? You know, how can we get these kids to connect with what we're doing? And we're just trapping, like, and the musicians know, like, everybody knows, like, this is where we going. You know what I mean?
And the fact that you have options like that, back in the day, it was like, I'm playing this worship set.
We're playing the song straight through, and that's what it is.
But the fact that there's variety, I didn't know that, see? And that gives it a better chance or more opportunities for your kid to listen.
For sure, and it's just, and I'm showing, every time I go out now, I'm showing my kids, like, hey, you know, I'm telling my wife, look, babe, this is where I'm at. Here's the live stream, like let them see, like, and they're seeing, if you've seen me worship before, I'm very out there, you know, I'm very expressive with my worship, I'm really out there. And so just allowing them to see that, you know, and maybe you're not that way, you're not expressive, but just letting them, like, finding those avenues. You got to find what works for you. Maybe what works for me won't work for you or for anyone listening, but what can work is making it fun, you know, and seeing that it's not, all right, we're just listening to this, like, okay, this is what we're doing. Like, no, it's not like we said in the beginning. It's not the hymns back in the day. There's so much variety now that you can, you know, that you can find. And so I think that's where we can start with that.
So we make it fun.
Yeah.
And again, I think the key part you said was not, this recipe won't work for everybody, but this is an option compared to the many others you can try.
Yeah.
And the fact you said there's all these, like, I've never heard of you said trap worship, bro?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I've heard something like with the instrumentation and they
Yeah,
add them,
yeah.
but that you're leading worship like that?
Yeah, and I'm singing like a regular song, like a
that's
song that we all
wild,
know, and
son.
we're trapping it like, let's go, you know?
I'm with that. Okay, so I
Yeah.
can see that's tip one. What you got for me again after that? If I can find it. To
And
make
then
it
from
fun.
there, as we're making worship fun, man, another thing that I thought of was like, do it together. Like, don't say, oh, son, like, here, I'm gonna give you these songs, or go listen to it, or I have a daughter too, like, just go listen to this. Like, do it together. Let him see that, like, you're doing it as well. You're not giving it to him as a task to go and do, or go figure it out. Like, no, like, instruct them along the way and let him see that you're doing it, because that's one thing I'm thankful for my dad. My dad grew up with salsa. He listened to all this Bobby Rosario and all this other stuff. And to this day, I still listen to that stuff because of what my dad did. And I was remembering, and I'm like, we did this together. Like, we will be in a little van, a little Chrysler, like, he's putting in, we had cassette tapes at that time. So we had to roll those things back.
Wow.
And like, he's putting them in there. And I remember we had a whole case, and then it got to CDs. And like, I would take his CDs and listen, but we were doing it together. I was doing it with my dad. My dad would tell me, hey, Gabi, listen to this song. Oh, listen. And I'm like, at the beginning, I'm like, okay. But it started like growing onto me. That's what my dad liked. And so we did it together. And so now I find myself sometimes doing it with my son
and
too.
that's
Like,
cemented in your life because he set that seed like
I'll
long
never
time
forget.
ago.
And he didn't know what he was doing, you know, because my dad didn't have an example like that, or.
But I can envision like when I hear you talk about
Yeah.
it, the excitement of like listening to Kerouing and some of these people.
All
Like,
those.
yeah, I'm thinking in my head, oh my
like, it's
God, that's crazy, bro.
And even my mom, like, she would listen to Sandy Patty. And
I tell you,
all like,
I'll tell you where I think, because as we're talking here, I'm trying to realize like where I've made some of the mistakes.
Yeah.
And so be it relatable to other fathers.
Sure.
I've had moments in church, okay, where I'm worshiping, you're loving the worship, or you're dealing with it at the moment. And because people are gonna be like, what are you talking about? And my son will be looking at me like, what are you doing, Daddy?
Right,
Like, what's
right.
going on? And so sometimes I felt like, am I really, and this will be another conversation for another day, but I'm thinking like, they have to see an example of worship in your life.
It's funny.
And so if they're not seeing that, which my son is not seeing right now, then no matter how much you scream and shout, if it's not real and authentic, they're never gonna follow.
And I think, Jay, that was my next point. Like, we have to be an example, and create opportunities for conversation. You know, like, now I'll be with my son. My daughter don't know as much. She sings the songs and stuff, but my son now, he's like, and even my daughter, for that fact, now that I remember, like, they ask questions like, why are they saying that? You know, why are they saying this in worship? Or why are they saying, I'll give it all to you, Jesus? You know, like, why are they saying those things? Or whatever song is on, and it's an opportunity for a conversation for them to be like, oh, this is why they're saying this. Man, I'll be honest, sometimes I'm in the car with my son, and like, I'm lost. I forget that he's there. And like, I'm really lost, man. Like, God is just really, like, I'm overwhelmed just by his love and thinking about his
And your son
faithfulness.
is watching.
And my son is seeing that. And he's not saying nothing, but he's seeing it, you know? And I'm sure that what I'm feeling at that moment, he's feeling as well.
And I want people to be clear on this, because
Yeah.
sometimes it could be misinterpreted like this overly emotional, like this crazy thing, when in reality, genuine worship, like,
Yeah.
when you know.
Yeah.
And so like, and the fact that your kid is watching that, like, that's extremely powerful to
Yeah.
me. I can't say my son has ever seen me like that, ever.
Yeah.
And it's like, if he's seen me, it's probably hearing KB or doing something that's a little more rough, and he's
Right,
like, what is this? Or it's so aggressive. And then sometimes, I'll be honest, Dooms,
Mm-hmm.
and you can give me the last one, I think you just said it. I found myself in moments where I won't make the right choice of music. And I think my whole dilemma with this was that we aren't able to cover the whole side of this, because I feel like at the end of the day, regardless of how many tips we give, this is all personal. Like, if you're not, it's like I've heard, like, if it's like at a company, if you don't set the culture at the top,
Yeah.
it won't trickle down.
Yeah.
And so, like, as a dad at your home, leading your family, your wife and your kids, if you're not showing that example, then you can't be barking
Right.
nothing to nobody. I'll give you an example, something that my wife did to me. I've said this story many times with many friends, and it's impacted them. But we can use the same scenario. When my son was 3 or 4, I remember we were at a sushi spot, and he was acting out of order, acting crazy, bro. Like, I couldn't get him to relax.
It's right, reckless.
And so I tried to like correct him in a public setting. Like he was on the table and I was like, stop it. And I said something. And my wife was like, yo, calm that down. If you don't correct him at home privately, don't do it publicly. And bruh, when I heard that, I was like, And then I went home
Right.
and I made some adjustments.
Yeah.
And thank God till now, we're not the best, but we try
Yeah.
to, and so I think it's the same thing. There may be dads that are
Yeah.
watching and are saying, bro, I'm at, like me right now, if I had to go from 1 to 10, I'm at a 2, I'm struggling,
Yeah.
doing bad, I'm not doing as much as I need to. Then I would say, at least for me, what I think I'm going to do, what will happen is internally evaluate some things, make sure I adjust specific things, start one thing at a time.
Yeah.
You know, if it's, we're not listening to this stuff in the car, or we're calming down on some of the YouTube content he's watching, whatever it is, wherever you have to gauge, because I feel like that's the way it should be. And so there's some work that needs to happen at home, because they have to see an example.